Hi students. So welcome to the Nctech prediction and revision part 1. So students, this revision has been effectively mapped based on your syllabus content. So this is just a revision of overall syllabus. It will be in different parts. So the part 1 of this revision is effectively focusing in the area called leadership. Now students, if you observe leadership section, you have to be very careful with the exam point of view. So I'll write down here exam point of view first. Now, one thing students, if you understand that pre-seen material, you need to have an idea. So leadership, if you observe students, 10% multiplied by 3 directors. Totally we have how many percent? 30% directors who are also what student? Shareholders. So students, this is one factor that you have to keep in mind. And also students, there is a 70% lot, they are institutional investors. Keep that in mind as well students, because this is the exam point of view. Now students, what we will effectively do is, now since we already know this, we have to plan it well. Now one thing students, the missing data in our examination is we have a HR director, correct now students, we have an HR director, but the information relating to staff count is not mentioned. Staff count data is not mentioned. So you have to make sure that you understand that application very well in order to write the answer properly in the examination. Now students, the first thing what we have to do is we have to summarize the leadership point of view, and then students, it will be very easy for you to learn as well. And one thing students, I have to give you a quick disclaimer before we go into this. You will never get anything directly from this session. Everything is based on your exhibit, because whatever you get on the exhibit, you will be able to think and write. And students, mapping questions by models is a risk. By models is a risk. Never go for that students, because there was an article or there was an explanation with regards to cultural web. Now students, that model would have supported the answer, but it doesn't mean that you have to memorize that model and write the same model again. And students, the other disclaimer is SBL examination is an application based examination. It is purely application. What you do with what you know, that is application students. In simple language, what you do with what you know, what you do with what you know, what you know. Okay, that is the application point of view the students need to keep in mind. Now students, coming into the overall picture, let's start working on this step by step. So if you see students, the leadership, I'll just summarize this into the following so that it will be very easy for you all to understand how the things work effectively, so that it will be easy for you. So students, if you observe, the first part is individual leadership, because that won't be tested, but actually better to understand some verbs when you're writing the answer. It will enhance the quality of the answer. And then students, the culture, because culture is a very important area, and I will be doing more towards the BT section as well and the technical articles. And students, if I'm not mistaken, ethics in decision making. Ethics in decision making is one more area that we have to keep in mind for the exam point of view. Ethics in decision making, and then students, culture. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, we have something called the change management. That is one more factor. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, talent management, because that is again one more factor to be considered, because our technical industry, we need talent in case if there is a change in the leadership. And then the final thing is students, bribery, because students, we may not know what will come in the examination, but don't memorize this, but bribery is generally there in the examination students. So just keep that in mind. So these are the main focus areas of this leadership topic. Now students, if you observe in the individual leadership, first we have to focus on trait leadership. Trait leadership means students, you just remember the term trait. Example, physical trait. Now if you look at actors like Arnold Schwarzenegger is a physical trait. How they look, Richard Branson, his beard, all are physical trait. And then students, the personality. The next one is personality. That means they will not have a good physique, but they may have a good personality, if I'm not mistaken, like Richard Branson. All these people are considered as personality. And then the other one is the social image they have created between the people, like Barack Obama. Now, students, this is the basic understanding of trait leadership. Now, one thing, exam point of view, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just write down here. Don't copy this in the examination, just get the understanding. We have this 30% directors who are the shareholders, who are the shareholders. Now, students, currently our customers are SME customers. And you'd have observed one thing, students, although we have SME customers, we are not growing. That means they are sustaining their relationship only based on our leaders. That is, our founders would have given them very good offers in the initial stages, and they are maintaining good relationship with them. They are answering their calls on time. So that is one more factor on individual leadership. Then students, the next one, if I'm not mistaken, coming into the action model is something called students. This is generally known by everyone, the Astridge model. I don't want to complicate this for you all. Now, if you see this Astridge model, now students, you would have studied this, if I'm not mistaken, just to give you an idea. It has the following styles of leadership. One is known as tell, that is autocratic style. That means you just tell the employees to do what you want, they must do. And then sell, that means still it's an autocratic style, but you consider stakeholder impacts. You consider stakeholder impacts, but you don't disclose to them, but you think towards that also. And then one comes the next one, if I'm not mistaken, is the consultation style. That is effectively you ask for opinion only. And the last one, students, if I'm not mistaken, we effectively call this as students the join or the democratic style. Frankly, students, there can be like changes in style, so you can just use these terms because there are potential. There can be some questions with regards to HR issues, but you have to make sure you understand these verbs. Now, I think since we are currently managed by the founders, we are effectively going with the, if I'm a sell style. That means they are making decision, but they are not very close to the employees. So just keep that in mind for your understanding, students. So that is one more thing. And the other one, students, just to keep in mind, we have something called the transactional leadership model, the transactional versus something called the transformational. Now, transactional means you do the job, once the job is over, you ask the people to depart. That is transactional. And transformation means like talent management. Now, you enhance their talent. Talent management, I will come to that later, but you multiply their talent. So that verbs can be used. And one more thing, students, entrepreneurship is something that we have at the moment. But we can also think about intrapreneurship. That is, you empower the employees to make their own decisions. So it can go with intrapreneurship also, entrepreneurship, and also it can go into the intrapreneurship also. Just keep that in mind, students. So these are the suggestions you can give in the exam. So I can say in the exam point of view, if they ask you something, don't directly map it. Think whether these terms are useful, and then based on that, you write the answer. So I believe this is the basic individual leadership models. Now, when coming to the second one on culture, the first culture we call it as the power culture. Power culture is like autocratic, where the owners make the decision. So I'll write down here, it's more autocratic. What is that, students? Autocratic culture. And after power culture, then we have the role culture. Role culture in that case, students, if I'm not mistaken, CEO has a role, CFO has a role. So after that, I can say effectively HR has a role. So they have to play their roles only. And then students, they have something called the task culture. Task culture means, students, they are like in project management. Now, let's do the project management later. But when it comes to the project management, it's task culture. Once the project is over, you are out. And then you have something called the person culture, where people are considered specifically on hospital. If you go to a hospital, students, people are considered. People are considered. So just keep that in mind for your understanding point of view. So this is the cultural framework that you have to keep in mind. But at the moment, students, I think one thing is power. Power is existing in our organization, and role. But we have to ensure there is a talent management where we use puppet model, something like that, and multiply our base of thinking because our industry is rapidly growing very fast. And the other one, students, in culture, if you see Edgar Schein, main idea principle, one is known as the artifact. Now, students don't need to memorize this, but just keep these things in mind. Artifacts mean, students, example, like the uniforms, what the employees wear. So these are the artifacts. And then, students, if I'm not mistaken, the exposed values. Now, students, if you see exposed value, it is always directly related with your business strategy. If you are a cost leadership students, the employees also will behave like a cost leadership. Now, when you go to a restaurant, which is a cost leadership, the employees are not interested in maintaining a relationship with you. They are interested in making sure the food is served and the money is collected. And if you go to a five-star hotel, the value changes. They are kind to you, they are very close to you, they dress nicely. And the other one is the basic assumptions. Now, basic assumption is another factor, students. Now, if you go, for example, if you go for a Muslim hotel, they will not serve you alcohol. So these are like basic assumptions that you have to keep in mind. So it always changes. Now, example, students, if you see our company, just for your idea, our company, I don't think they have invested on artifacts. They have invested on this exposed value to the employees. And the basic assumption is very clear. 30% owners are there. That is the basic assumption. And they control the business. That is what they are having. There is no much of an ideology of a corporation. It's almost like a business run by friends. So keep that in mind, students. And then, students, as usual, the other one, as you already know, is the cultural web. So, students, I'll just write down here cultural web. Cultural, what, students? Cultural web. Now, there is a video on ACCA channel, and also there are some articles relating to that. And this question came last time. And students, I am having a very high level doubt. Culture can come, but the same question will come, but they may not want a cultural web, because in case if you think it is suited, you use it, but always give the priority to the exhibit. Without the exhibit, please don't take much risk. It will be a huge challenge for you. So students, if you observe cultural web, what I can effectively say is symbols. One is called the symbols, if I'm not mistaken. Then students, we have the power, the same thing, the power structure. Now currently the directors are only having the power, if I'm not mistaken. Organizational structure, they have given you the picture, no students. Currently it's a flat wide organization. CEO is in the top and then it's wide. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, the other factor we have to think about the control system. They have given a risk register. Can you remember, students? One risk register has been given, control system. Then students, rituals and routines. They have not given much about this at the moment. There needs to be something. Stories are there, but they have not branded the stories, and the assumption factors are also there. I'll just attach a picture of the cultural web later, but just keep in mind, students, in the examination, they want application. Let's assume a student has studied everything. It won't help him to pass. Now, one thing of model is it can help you to structure your headings only. But the examiner is not concerned whether you are copy pasting the same information. You have to assess this. Currently, the control is with the directors. However, it is not sustainable since they need to retire one day. When they are retiring, we need to have a controlling power which is systemized through corporate governance, where there is a nomination committee. So you have to make sure you write answers similar to that. So I believe that is one more thing. And students, this is there in the technical article. I have a high level doubt. You can use the students, this Hofstede's, if I'm not mistaken, Hofstede's cultural dimensions or cultural model. Now, this is like when you're going for an international expansion. Now, let's assume Nctech. So, I'll just write down here, students. Now, last time the question came effectively on what they are currently, the new CEO came, what are the changes that has taken place. Now, Hofstede's cultural dimension is Nctech is expanding to a foreign country, expanding internationally. Now, students, if you see Indian culture is different from the Western organization culture. So this model is focusing on how you can make your organization go with the international structures. So the first thing, students, you have to understand the power distance. Because students, if you observe, in the UK, people call the names of their boss, but in India, they call it as sir. That means in India, the power is very high when the positions are high. But in UK, it's different considering the Indian culture. And then students, individualism versus collectivism. Now, students, if you observe, team like Australia, when they are playing a cricket match, you would have observed they play for the team, collective feelings. But if you see India, they will play for the individual. They want to make a record. They want to score 100. So there is a huge disparity. Likewise, certain organizations, they work collectively, like America. Now, if you see Americans work collectively, but if you see in certain region, they don't like to share knowledge. It will affect their talent management. Keep that in mind, students. And then, students, the next thing that you have to keep in mind is, if I'm not mistaken, is short-termism versus long-termism, I can say. But students, if you see, if you observe, certain culture is always short-term. They don't think about the long term. They'll just want to make sure they're happy today. Especially like India. Now, EMI, everything, people short-termism. But if you go to Germany, they are thinking in the long term. China is thinking in the long term. America is thinking in the long term. So you have to make sure that you have to apply those things properly. And the next thing, students, if I'm not mistaken, just to give you an idea, is masculinity versus femininity. Masculinity versus femininity. So students, understand it very well, students. In this case, you get to understand one thing, that is, this is not a direct like male female, it's the culture. Now, masculine culture is, students, competition and pressure, because they love competition and pressure. But if you see feminine, they are almost like stagnant. They don't want to take risk. That is one more thing, students. Stagnant, relationship based, very much relationship based. And the final thing, students, we call it as uncertainty avoidance, because this is a very, very, very important point of view, because we are in the technology industry. Uncertainty, what, students? Uncertainty avoidance. Now, if you see in uncertainty avoidance, they want risk. Certain people want risk versus does not want risk. Does not want risk. So I believe that you are getting the ideology of this very, very clearly, students, because this is practically important for all of the students to get this understanding how things work, because this gives you a better clarity. So just keep that in mind, students. You just have an idea about this. But don't memorize this, students. But these headings will only help you to structure the answers. Now, the next thing, students, ethics in decision making. Now, students, I think everyone will be an expert in ACCA Code of Ethics. But here, more than ACCA Code of Ethics, the examiner wants you, again with the technical article, there is something called AAA 7 questions, if I'm not mistaken. That is American Accounting Association. It's there in the technical article, students. American Accounting Association. There are questions when they ask for ethical decision making. The first thing, if I'm not mistaken, is what are the facts? What are the facts? You have to understand the facts. Like example, you are going to sell company data. Now that is the fact. Okay, I'll just write down here selling company data. Selling data. Selling data. That is a fact. Then the second question that a person needs to ask very transparently is what is the ethical issue? Now, selling data is the proposal. In that, what is the ethical issue? The ethical issue, you know the answer, students. The answer is privacy of the clients. Correct, no, students? Privacy of the clients. Privacy of the clients. Privacy of the clients. And the next one, students, if I'm not mistaken, the third one, if I'm not mistaken, is general norms and principles. General norms and principles. That means what are the practices in the market? Now, students, if you observe in certain countries like India, everything, data is not a big issue. People can take your data, sell it. No one will ask any questions. So I'll write down here, depends on the exhibit. Depends on the exhibit. We don't know at the moment. Ireland is a developed country, but we don't know whether do they have rules, regulations, nothing at the moment. Then, students, the fourth question that a person needs to ask in this particular situation is there any alternate course of actions? Instead of selling data, can we do something else? That is one thing. Or can I write down here, instead of selling data, alternate course of action? Can we do something else, something else, something else, something else? That is one more thing. And then students, the fifth question that may arise is something called, of these options, what is the best course of action? Best course of option. Now, my point of view is money. As per the money perspective, I can effectively say the best course of action is what? Sell data. Let's assume we are comparing sell data. Let's come to that. Then students, next thing, why I am suggesting it. So the next one is analyze the consequences. Analyze what, students? Consequences. You have to ask yourself what are the consequences of analyzing the data. Example, students, any fines. Sometimes there can be fines. But at the moment, there is nothing like that. Security breaches were there. You get to observe that. But it was nothing related to the privacy breach. Understand the difference there. And the last one, if I'm not mistaken, is make decision. After you analyze the conclusion, make the decision. Make the decision. Students, I believe that this you can just keep to structure a model for your understanding perspective. Now, students, the next one in ethical decision making, again, it is from the technical article called Tuckman 5 questions. Tuckman 5 questions. Again, students, it is very, very easy. Now, again, the same thing I will apply the data selling. Now, one thing as usual, the first question is it profitable? Is it what, students? Is it what, students? Is it profitable? That is the first question. The answer can be yes. The answer can be what, students? Yes. Is it profitable? The answer can be yes. And then, students, the second one, if I'm not mistaken, is it legal? Is it what, students? Legal. Now, the question arises at the moment, no rules. So, can I write down here no rules? No rules. Therefore, yes. Therefore, yes. Therefore, yes. We don't know. In the exam day, you may have, but at the moment, we are not sure. So, assumption is we don't know. Is it fair? Again, it's a subjective question. Depends on market norms. Depends on market norms. If the market is fine, okay, no problem. We can go ahead with this. And then, students, the fourth one, effectively, after the fair, is it right? Maybe fair, market is it right? Since market is doing, it's right. I can say yes, it is fine. It is fine. It is fine. It is fine. Again, these two are subjective question. And the last one is it sustainable? The last one is sustainable. Whether is this a sustainable decision? The answer can be, once again, students, yeah. So I'll write down here, yes, it is. It is. Again, these questions on Tuckman all is purely based on the exhibit. So don't memorize it, but these models will help you to structure the answer if needed. And don't go for the shortcut where you read the exhibit and, oh, I think this model will be suited. No. You always try to make sure that without models, if you are going to write a quality answer to the management, with all the futuristic point of view, proper analysis, you understood the verbs, the question requirement, then go for it. So the next one, students, after going to the ethics is the change management, students. It's once again the examiner's favorite topic, and there can be chances of change management. The reason is currently we are in flux. Currently Nctech is in flux. Is in flux. Correct, no, students? Flux means, why you say flux? Because we have only IaaS, infrastructure as a service, but the market has SaaS, that is software as a service, which is even far better and easy for SME, because software as a service, only Dropbox, all these companies are software as a service, very cheaper for startup businesses and easy also. Now, students, if you see the change management, now what are the models that we can apply is the important thing. Now, again, don't memorize it. One is Kurt Lewin model. So it is something called the unfreeze. That means you tell the people, unfreeze, that is, create a motivation or distraction. Create a motivation or a distraction. Just make sure they are comfortable. They are comfortable with the change. Because initially when you go with high level of rules and regulation, people may not like it. Then you have to change, implement the change, implement the new policies, and test them. That is very, very important. Feedbacks are important. And after you go for the change, the last one is effectively going to be freeze. That means standardize the new change. Standardize the new change. Standardize the new change. So students, this is only effectively known as the change management principle. I believe this is very, very clear for you all students. And again, please be careful. Everything depends on the exhibit. But understand these verbs. Unfreeze, create a distraction, like explain them, educate them, give some ideas for them, then change their perspective, then freeze them. So effectively, this will be a development in point of change management. And then students, the other one is force field analysis. So I'll just write down here force field analysis. Now, if you see force field analysis, if you see we have an ideal state. The ideal state, let's assume we have to go for software as a service. Now students, current state is where we are currently in infrastructure as a service. So there are two forces. One is known as restraining forces. People's are unwillingness. That is unwillingness is restraining forces. But students, there is something called driving forces. That means you have to create motivations. So I'll write down here motivations. Tell them what are the importance. Company may become liquidated if we are not updating. Kodak, everything went down. So please keep that in mind for your understanding. And then students, we have the other one, the Kotter and scale singer. Now students, again, don't memorize anything. Just remember these verbs. One is known as students participation. Now can you remember practical point of view? Now if you see our company practically, we are having mostly an autocratic style or the cell style. And if you see our business is more like an entrepreneurship business, although it's a listed company. So participation is doubtful. And then students, we have education and communication. This can be done. You can educate the people, but again, education is challenging. They have to accept it. And then students, we have something called facilitation and support. Facilitation and support. And then students, we have something called manipulation, because that you have to keep in mind. Manipulation and co-optation. We call it, you just make sure they are understanding that. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, negotiations can come into the role here for your understanding. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, we can also use the power, intimidate them, and coercions can be used. Again, these are the headings. But students, again, I'm telling you, even if you don't know all this, still you can pass the exam. But there are challenges. If you know everything, just you replicate this SBL exam. Please be careful. The talent management students, as you already know, we need to have succession plan. As I already told you, succession plan. This can come for a PPT, but it has already come, right? PPT, it has come. So I just want to give you some idea. Puppet model, I think you may be aware. Just keep in mind that is people, okay? Then students organization or organization. Then students process. And the last one is what students? Information technology, people, process, all these things. So I believe students, these are the puppet factors that you have to keep in mind. So how the people, now if you see our people, cloud architects must be there, if I'm not mistaken, or cloud technicians, I can effectively, they are not given in the examination. They are not given. That is the question to be considered. An organization, if you observe students, we are not given how it works out. The HR function is not properly, the process is not given, and the IT, because we have to update our system. So this can come in the examination. Just have a review of this. Bribery students, I just want to give you UK Bribery Act. Just remember this, you can quote this in the exam. It is 2010. So you can just say bribery is illegal. It's not ethical, students. It is illegal. Now license can come, no students, because in case if there's a government license or something like that, bribery can come into the action. Again, when bribery comes, you have to think in this point of view. Is it profitable? Yes. Is it legal? No. But is it fair? Yes, because although it is illegal, it is fair because there are no strict rules. Is it right? Again, it's again without that can't be operate and sustainable. Yes, so you have to analyze it properly and do it, students. That thinking level is important. So this is the overall idea about the leadership area that they may test. And again, students, remember these headings and just have some idea on how you can apply these things in the examination. And students, this can come for 30 marks. I can just say 30 marks, or I can effectively say this can come for around 20 marks to 30 marks in the exam. Suppose if it comes, it's a bonus, but don't memorize this, students. Just recap what I'm doing, students. Keep for your understanding. So thank you very much, students. I will develop the part 2, which will be focusing on corporate governance. Thank you.